Welcome. Today we have, I think, a really interesting topic to discuss. Before I get there, just again, a couple of I always start out with a couple of reminders. My husband's show, Mark Bianchi, is going to be on tomorrow at noon. So try and catch his show, Mindful Money Matters with Mark Bianchi, and that will start at noon tomorrow. And I think he has a guest on his show tomorrow, so it looks to be like it's going to be a very good show for him, which is great. Matthew Delfino is still in the hospital, so keep Matthew Delfino in your prayers as well. And also, our president is sick, so please send out prayers. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, we need to have civil discourse in this country. So our prayers should go out to the president and his family and those affected by the virus, not only these Americans, but the rest of everyone. We've lost 210 plus thousand Americans at this point. 7.5 million people that we know of have been infected so far. So please keep everybody in your prayers, and let's all try and wear a mask and stay safe during this pandemic. Okay, with that said, today's show is going to be a little bit different because I've never really talked about these before. And I wanted to go through a little bit of the seven deadly sins. You hear that phrase all the time, and you think you know what they are and how they can affect you. But the seven deadly sins not only affect the living, but they can also affect people who have left their body and may not have fully transitioned. And it could be the cause of why they haven't fully transitioned. So I kind of wanted to go in today and examine that a little bit and talk about it. So I actually made some notes today because seven is far too many things for me to remember. So I'm going to try and read them off and kind of go through them one at a time and talk about some of them and talk about experiences that I had where spirits may have been caught because of what their belief systems were or how they were potentially even in life, but how those things have kept on through their journey to God's light. So we'll go through that process here in a little bit. I'm going to take a little rooibos tea before we start here. That is delicious. Okay, so let's get started. So what are the seven deadly sins? So the first one that we have to talk about, so I'll just list them off firstly, but there's lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. So these are the ones that we want to talk about. I want to kind of look at these in our own life. And if you think about what these are, they are basically all excesses of something that is perfectly natural and perfectly true to the human experience, and something that we experience almost on a daily basis. But it's letting things get out of control and not being able to keep them under control in our daily life, which makes them incredibly disastrous to our present and to what we're trying to accomplish in our life. And so if you look at the first one, as far as lust is concerned, and having a healthy love, love is one of the best, or if not the best, emotion that we can experience as human beings. But the excess of that and how we channel that love can be really detrimental to our spiritual well-being, being, as well as our every aspect of our life, if we let that get out of control. Gluttony, obviously, one of the pleasures that we have as humans is, to be able to taste and savor and get delight in different types of foods that we all enjoy. So that's perfectly natural and perfectly fine to do, but it's the excess. And gluttony always, gluttony can be or has been extended to other areas. It's defined as an excessive obsession with food primarily, but gluttony can extend to other areas of your life. Gluttony as it relates to even money, for example, or other aspects of your life where you're trying to get too much of something. Another one would be, obviously, when we talk about greed. It is okay to accumulate wealth and have money. No one is saying you need money to live. We all need to make money and do the things in our lives that are beneficial to us to have a life. But what we can't do is make that the full focus of what we're supposed to be doing. Money, I have found through what I do and through just life experience, does not necessarily make anybody happy. What it does do, it may provide comfort, it may provide a means to an end, it may provide security, but it really doesn't bring happiness. I've seen a lot of people who have no money be some of the happiest people I've ever met at all. And I've seen people who were extremely wealthy and they are miserable in their own personal life and what they feel that they haven't accomplished or can't accomplish. So money itself does not buy happiness. So just, happiness comes from within. Happiness usually comes a lot from giving and helping and doing these types of activities rather than just the acquisition itself of wealth. Sloth, obviously, this is an easy one. Sloth is something that really can affect your present, particularly spiritually, when you take spirituality for granted, when you don't believe in prayer, or you don't believe in service to others, or you don't believe in service to your business or service to others. This type of activity is one of those activities that, again, you can have downtime. There's nothing wrong with downtime. There's nothing wrong with lying on the beach. There's nothing wrong with taking a vacation. Those are all good things. But just the idea of sloth itself in general, in any aspect of your life, is just not healthy. When you finally, it's almost like giving up. And giving up is nothing that you should ever do. We should always try, even if it's incrementally, try to figure out a way to move forward in our lives. Wrath kind of goes a little bit in tandem with, or can go in tandem with, envy, or has it went in my experience with the spirit world per se. But wrath is obviously, it's okay to be angry. It's a human emotion. We're here to experience that emotion. It's not something that you can conceptualize. You can't conceptualize anger. We may be able to empathize with somebody else's anger or what we consider them to be a just cause. But unless you live that experience, it's very difficult for you to understand perhaps why someone is angry. Now, take that for my own self. This week, as some of you may know who follow me on social media, we've had a lot of issues lately with vandalism at my house, and it's some of it's politically motivated and things people aren't real thrilled with, maybe the signs I have out in my yard. So they're taking it out on the signs on my property, even doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And I got very, very angry for that. And it's really one of those things that I tried all week to really kind of combat, to try to figure out how I can stay in a spiritual state without letting that anger overtake my life. My husband is very good in keeping me grounded in that way. Rosie Shapiro is fantastic. She's given me a lot of advice over the last week or so on how to stay centered. So I appreciate that, Rosie. And for my husband, Mark, obviously, who basically grounds me on a daily basis. But there are I let people in my life that are good friends and good people, because these are the people that ground me. What I do is it keeps me kind of sometimes in two worlds at one time. And it's very difficult to live that way sometimes. So I need that grounding, and I like to put people in my life that ground me. So try and stay, again, having that anger, having that, it's that retaliatory aspect of trying to figure out and having it take over your life in some capacity at the expense of your normal life is just not healthy. And I found that this past week, it was not being healthy for me. It wasn't serving me. It wasn't serving me to do for my clients or for myself or for marriage or my friendships. So I just wanted to step back a little bit from that, and it has helped immensely. So, I kind of like to give some of my personal experiences because I do what I do. It doesn't make me at all, in any stretch of the imagination, perfect or have all the answers. But if I have something that comes from my personal experience, I like to include it in there so that people know that I struggle with these same issues. And that's one of them that I struggled with this past week. Envy is, again, jealousy, envy, these types of things of having something or wanting something that somebody else has or is in its core. there's a lot of envy in my industry, for example, of some people who are envious of other people's gifts. I see that all the time with other mediums or psychics or things who are envious of other people's journeys and what they're accomplishing and what they're not. And instead of, what they don't realize is that that feeling of envy really takes them away from their own gift, because once you start down one of these roads of the seven deadly sins, it does take you off your center and takes you away from the core goodness that you're trying to achieve. So try to stay away in any way that you can from these types of excesses, because it really is detrimental, particularly if you're gifted in some way, in this way, to your gift. We all have different gifts. So trying to be envious of somebody else's, it does not serve you at all. Work with the gift that you have. Pray that you may be able to obtain or attain different types of gifts that you may want. But if you don't get them, it shouldn't make you envious of somebody else's. Work with what you have. I always liken that to singing. I'm fascinated by people who can sing well. I cannot carry a tune. I try and sing Happy Birthday and I can clear a room. So it's not one of those talents I have, and I just have to accept that. I actually took voice lessons not too long ago, and that stopped because it wasn't helping anybody. While I may be able to eventually hit a note, it's not one of those areas that I'm ever going to be good at. And I just know my limitation in that area. So I won't be singing in front of a stadium full of people ever, but I have other talents that I can rely on and hopefully give back to humanity and give to spirit. Okay. The other one is pride. It's hard with pride because you should take pride in what you do. But taking pride and taking that to an extreme, at the exclusion of all else, is where you start to run into problems. Being prideful of your relationships or of what you've been able to accomplish, those are all good things. But what happens is, if you start to take pride to an extreme, is that, again, like everything else on this list, it starts to hurt you in the end, because now you're not trying to grow any longer. You're basically trying to hold on to show everybody else what you've been able to accomplish, what you've done, and it stunts your growth. So being prideful, take pride in what it is. Take that momentary pride. Give yourself a pat on the back, and make sure that you do get that acknowledged for yourself, because that's important for your own mental health and your own journey. But again, taking that to an extreme, you're basically cutting off where you were at that moment and living in that moment in the past, and not looking to the things that you might be able to accomplish in the future. So, have those momentary wins. I think, I look at them as snapshots. We used to have Polaroids back in the day. It's a snapshot of where you were in a place and time at that moment. So take the time that you need to acknowledge that, look at it, get that sense of accomplishment, and then continue to move on, continue to grow, continue to expand. It's when we become prideful that this is who we are, and we look at this is only who we are, that we stop growing as individuals, as spiritual beings, and in other ways. So do keep those in mind. So I wanted to explain those just a little bit. Obviously, you can look up the definitions of them. You can look at philosophers and look at the philosophical impacts of each one of these. But I wanted to look at a general overall topic, particularly as it relates to spirituality. There are bigger implications of the seven deadly sins in people's lives from other aspects, but looking at the spiritual sense and how it's tied into my spiritual journey and my experience is what I want to really talk about this evening. So let's take a look at one of the first ones of those. So I'm going to we'll take a rooibos break again. So before we get into the first one, I want to just say how much I really do enjoy working with spirit. I love my job. I love what I do. And today, it always amazes me what spirit is able to convey sometimes through this experience. And I had a client today that I talked to, and just as a quick example of things that even amazes me sometimes, is I was talking to her, and the grandfather started to come through. She asked specifically about her grandfather. I saw a man in military dress, and I asked him if asked her if he was in the military, and he was. And the strange thing was he was standing next to this woman that had, that I gave her the name, and turned out to be right. She did have a great aunt by this name that was related to this man. And the strange thing was that they showed me specifically him walking in, if you call it heaven, call it whatever you want for your own use, but walking, on the other side with these dogs, and they didn't look like beagles; they looked like hound dogs and hunting. So I asked her specifically whether or not he ever hunted, and he passed before she was even born, so she had none of the answers to these questions. But I talked about the dogs and how he interacts with them and how he interacted with them on this plane, and why these dogs were important to him. And just about maybe 15, 20 minutes before we went on air, I got a text message from her. She talked to her mom, who confirmed all of these things for her. So it's amazing to me sometimes just how spot on spirit is, if you're open and willing to get the communication and to understand the messages that you're getting. So it was a fantastic message. There was more to that for her that was on a personal level for this gentleman, and she got those messages, and hopefully they'll serve her well in the rest of her journey on this plane. So anyway, just sometimes I'm just fascinated by how this works, because sometimes I don't even know where it's coming from. I just get the information and pass it along. That's all we are, is basically conduits for information and energy. So it's kind of funny. But the first one I want to talk to you with regards to the 7 deadly sins tonight has to do with lust. And lust is a big one. I get this one. There's some that I have run into more often on this list, and I'll talk about those in particular. But lust is one of those ones, because lust, while it really usually relates to another interaction with a human being, lust could be for something else. Could be lust of something or some things, and maybe not just one person. It could be a lust of something else. I won't go into like lust of money or something else, because that might get into some other aspects of things like greed. But I'll stick with lust for the moment. Lust is one of those emotions that, again, with love being a very, very powerful emotion on this plane, when you have that taken to an extreme and you pass in that mindset of lustfulness, it becomes a real challenge and a sticking point for many souls that are trying to cross. I've come across souls that have had an immense love and that love stays. So a lot of times it'll be from visiting spirits that I'll get the love from a mother to a child, or a child to a parent, or spouses or siblings even. But that love between parent and child is usually the strongest one that I get. Usually the mother is an amazing, amazing, amazing love. One, as a man, that I don't know, but for the fact that I'm able to channel that energy, and it's overwhelming. It's something that I've never experienced before, being able to channel that energy. But lust, when it's taken to, or love, when it's taken to an extreme, and you have lust in your heart and in your soul, it's very difficult for you to want to cross, because the object of your affection, perhaps, is still on this plane, and they don't want to cross over. One of the worst examples I have had of this, I'll sit forward earlier, I see the chart. One of the worst examples I've ever had of this was with a client of mine who, with his girlfriend, moved into a new apartment. And they got into the apartment, everything was fine and going well. But after a few days, a few weeks, they started to notice where, when he would go to work, that his girlfriend was starting to be, I would say, attacked physically, but she would start to see things, and she thought she was going a little crazy, and she would call him at work, and he thought that, you're nuts. There's nothing there. Quit calling me, quit bothering me. And it kept increasing in frequency and intensity, where she would start to see shadows in the house, and she would see things or feel things. Or at one time, she flipped on the mirror in the bathroom, and she saw another woman as reflected in the mirror behind her. Turned around, nothing was there, but it frightened her, and she was absolutely petrified of being in the home alone. She didn't want to be there. And she was actually driving her boyfriend crazy. And he would actually come home a couple of times early from work to comfort her and to be with her. Turns out that he felt he knew what this was. And I went there. And what it turned out to being was there was a girl who had committed suicide in the house because she was um, lustful after a guy that would not pay attention to her. And she took it personally and took her own life in the apartment because the feelings that she had for someone were not being reciprocated. And so she decided to take her life in the apartment. When this new couple moved into the apartment, this spirit did not leave because she was still kind of obsessed with the man who would not uh, return her affections. And she kind of latched on to the energy of this new man, my client, who was in the home. And she started to make his life interesting. He would feel sensations. I'll leave it generally speaking, like in that way, where kind of sometimes of a sexual nature, where he would experience touching um, and just made him uncomfortable because he didn't know what was happening. And the fights in the house would escalate and the arguing, and they were never at peace. And he would get angry and he didn't know why. And all these things were happening and it wasn't like them. So when they came to me, they would already been through this process quite a bit. So going in there and finding out that this spirit was latched onto this guy and was trying to do everything that she could to drive a wedge between my client and his girlfriend so that she would leave and he would be in that apartment by himself. And this is how kind of insidious lust can be, because she didn't want to continue her journey. She felt the feeling, she felt the love that he had for his girlfriend on the physical plane, and wanted to experience that, wanted all that love and affection heaped on her, and felt that if she got her the girlfriend out of the picture, that she could in some capacity take that place, get the feelings, have the feelings that he was experiencing. Obviously that didn't work. It took a lot to convince her that she was on the wrong road, on the wrong journey, and needed to change course and needed to cross over. It wasn't an easy crossing. But it was this lack of understanding and this lack of, I guess, rationalization of her feelings that she didn't have in this life. When she passed, it didn't carry over with her, and she was stuck, and then wanted to do everything she could to accomplish this task, and felt in spirit form that she had maybe an easier way of accomplishing the task. It would have been very, let's just say it wasn't going to be great for her soul's journey to do what she was doing, and she needed to stop. And once I explained that to her, she was less willing to cross, but knew what she had to do, and that was part of her journey, and that these feelings would be resolved when she actually made it to the other side, that she would understand what happened and the error that she was making in her judgment and in her life, and what caused her to take her own life, and was able to cross. And so I use her as a story right now. I haven't interacted with her since she crossed, but she had some learning to do, and processing these emotions. When she crossed it, she understood the downside effects of lust, and that's one of them. So that's just one example of one spirit that I've encountered that has had this. It also happens in reverse. I've had spirits that, in one instance, a man and a woman that again that owned a house that were having spirit activity in their home. I went to the house and I found that the woman, that I don't know how to say this really well, the man and the woman who were living in the home, he lost his first wife to cancer, brain cancer specifically, is what I felt, and he confirmed that. And when she passed, he always felt kind of her presence in the home. And when he remarried, the new wife also always felt that there was something in the house. Well, going there, one of the first things I said to them was, I'm getting a spiritual three-way, because it felt like he was married to two women. because they're both in his life. There's the one that he's married to in the physical plane that had all of his material and other needs met on this plane, and his wife who passed didn't feel guilty that she'd passed. She had crossed completely over. She wasn't hovering. She wasn't stuck between worlds. But she was really involved in making sure that emotionally and um, and spiritually that he was okay with the crossing. So they all felt each other's presence in the home. It wasn't a bad thing. And they, quite frankly, when I told them that I felt like a spiritual, I hate to say it that way, but a spiritual, menage a trois, where where you've got three people in this marriage, basically, because she was so strong and such a strong presence, but it was based in love for him. And his new wife did not take that personally, understood that that the spirit was part of his life before. She backed out of all the aspects, but the woman of spirit, wanted her husband to still be happy. And she told me that she kind of put them in contact with one another because she wanted him to be happy and found this another mate for him. So she kind of did some matchmaking from the other side so that they could all have their spiritual paths enlightened in some way through this process. So her passing actually put a couple of people together so that they could have and share additional experiences before their time to cross. So this is a spirit doing a good thing, and maybe that's a lot of involvement for me, but they were happy with it and all comfortable with the feelings that they had in the house. Occasionally, both of them felt it, but in that same home, there were also some negative things. And I did talk about this on Robert's Honda Pajama Party, where there was a vehicle that was involved where a spirit, this gentleman bought a car, and it was just a shell of a car, but it had been in a barn, rather, excuse me, in Louisiana. And apparently the people that owned the farm, there was somebody had passed, and they were trying to get rid of this junk in the barn and found this old car there and put it on eBay, and a man bought it. And when he bought this car, he had it shipped over, but with it came the man who owned this car before. And we're getting into here pride and jealousy, this pride and envy and greed of something, that somebody else has something that he felt belonged to him, and he wasn't going to let it go. This car was his. He took pride in it. He showed me himself in the late 1950s, showing this car, polished this car. He spent all his time, effort, energy on this car. He loved this car. And when he passed, it just got stuck into a barn and basically started to deteriorate from that point on, so from the 60s on. And so, but he stayed in the barn. He stayed with his car, refused to cross because he wanted to be around this car, around his pride and joy. And when this car was sold and somebody else bought it, that jealousy, that envy, that rage, that greed, that this is mine and nobody else can have my things, took over, and he became a very, very strong, nasty spirit in the house. And he was horrible, and saying things and doing things that were just untenable for the people on this plane. So he was speaking through their security system, causing damage outside the home, trying to get into the home, threatening people in the home. So he was really just angry and wanted his car back, and wanted to be with it. At the end of the day, it was necessary to cross the soul. He didn't go easily. I will say that very clearly. This was probably one of the tougher crossings I've ever had. Because he just did not want to let go. But once I told him that once he crossed, he would be allowed to come back and visit if he wanted to, and also told the homeowner who now owned this car to just let him know that he was going to take care of it and watch over it and have as much pride and joy in this vehicle as the previous owner. To let him know that it would be taken care of, that his property would be cared for and revered, and the spirit took that to heart and understood that his time with that object was no longer something that he was in his time frame, and he needed to cross over, that there were loved ones waiting for him on the other side, and his spiritual journey needed to continue. And that's what happened eventually. So, and now he's fixing up the car, and hopefully one of these days I'll get an update and see what he's done to that vehicle. But again, this is one of those issues where a spirit decided not to cross because of a thing. And sometimes we think that, you know, sometimes when we take, I guess when we take things too far, we don't understand some of the consequences. And here is just kind of a helpful tip for people would be to make sure that what you're don't get too involved in things, because they're just things. You can't take them with you, which is absolutely true. And in this instance, you know, he couldn't take it with him, so he refused to go. But don't get in that situation. Don't get bogged down in things that they take over your life in such a way that it makes your crossing, or even quite frankly, your present, something that is challenging. You know, if you love something so much, for example, a car, that is taking you away from your children or your friends or your work, or it's that much of an obsession for you, this is not good. And you know, it's okay to have a hobby. It's okay to be passionate about your hobby, but don't let it get to a point where it has a negative impact on your life, or possibly your crossing, which it did in this instance. Let me see real quick if we have any questions out there. Take a look. And I don't see any at the moment here. But if you do have questions about any of these subjects, please let me know. I'd be happy to kind of look at them in detail. But let me give a couple more examples of some situations that I found. One was on wrath. Let's get into that one, I guess. I think a lot of what people think of when they think of ghosts are think of angry spirits that are doing things to people, touching them, or throwing things, or moving things, or misplacing things, or doing this kind of activity. And most of the time, this is wrath involved here. I don't think I've come into too many consequences where it's been things other than wrath, or wrath was a major component in that crossing. But when spirits get angry, what tends to happen is over time, these spirits start to, I always like to talk in terms of spiraling up and spiraling down. In life, I don't believe in a whole lot of stagnation. We're either moving one direction or the other. What's the old adage is, you know, once something's in motion, it tends to stay in motion. And this happens to be. And so when you're taking this downward spiral, sometimes when you have to hit rock bottom, that's when it stops and you can start taking those necessary steps to start spiraling up again. This is similar, where in wrath, when you die with this anger or this vitriol in your soul and in your soul's journey, what happens over time is it starts to feed on itself. And sometimes that spirit can become very, very strong because, they're looking. Anger is one of those emotions, and wrath and vengeance are some of those emotions that really kind of self-perpetuate and feed on itself. So one of these things that I do caution you on, if you're in a situation where somebody died and they were angry, and you come into a house and you're feeling this anger or something else, do try to seek out a medium, because you need to solve that, because sometimes it only gets worse. I've never, ever come into a situation where there's been wrath involved with the spirit where it's ever gotten better on its own. Never happened. I've never seen it happen that way in all my experience, or even in contact with other mediums that I've talked to. You have to get rid of that energy 100%, get rid of it completely, but you really can't deal with it. I think I will say once I did deal with it where a client decided not to have me come to remove this energy. And because of that, I'll take a backtrack. She called me to help remove an entity that she felt in the house. She did in fact have one, been there for a long time. She tried to get rid of it without her parents' knowledge. And it started to really, really act up and cause some major havoc in the house to her and to the home in general, because this entity knew that I was coming. And so she called me up and she canceled, and then the activity died down again. She called me back because it had died down and she said, come now. And then it started to act up again. But at the end of the day, it acted up so much and scared her so much that she decided not to try to do anything to get rid of this entity. She just decided to say, okay, I'm just going to leave it alone. And I told her what she needs to do is go back to a detente situation, go backwards where she knows it's in the house, but it ignores her, she ignores it, and they can continue on their separate paths, kind of occupying relatively the same space. And that seems to be where she found her comfort level. I wouldn't have recommended that. I would have preferred to get that energy out of the house, but that's her choice. I can't make that choice for people. All I can do is try to help if they'll let me. And in this case, she decided and opted for what she felt was the safest option for her at that time. So hopefully she's still well and living a good spiritual journey. But in other aspects, wrath itself is one of those components that are challenging to work with this energy. So I can't tell you how many times I've been to places. Mark and I think I told the story relatively recently where Mark and I went on vacation, and probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, where we were in a cabin in the woods, and this was his cabin, and we shouldn't be there. He claimed it for his own. He's claiming the space, and he did not want us there. And again, talking with him, I chose not to cross him over. He didn't want to go, and I didn't feel a need to force him out. This was his home. But I told him why, when I thought he should go. He just refused, and so I let him stay. But that anger that he felt towards us because we were disturbing his house, the footsteps, the moving of things, the presence in the house, all designed to try and make us leave that space because he was not happy. Was just in another space not too long ago where an entity had taken over an attic and felt safe there. And when the family decided to do construction in the home, it upset this spirit greatly because the spirit had lived in this home at one point and didn't want to change stuff, was happy with the home the way that it looked in the 70s, didn't want to remodel, didn't need to be updated as far as they were concerned. And they felt that they were changing their home. And what has to happen is you have to be able to convince these souls that this is no longer their property. This is no longer theirs. Again, and I always go back to the adage with these spirits that when you die, you cannot take it with you. And sometimes, most of the time, explaining that and understanding that this is not in their best souls or their higher soul's purpose or their higher soul's journey. This is one of those aspects that I do try to make sure that I convince them of, and maybe show them a glimpse of the other side, or maybe try and channel somebody that they knew or loved, so that they get the connection that they're actually going to go to a place that is going to be beneficial to them. They see the benefit of staying here in a home, but they don't see the benefit of continuing on their soul journey. Maybe they didn't have that belief system on this plane, or for whatever reason it happens to be. They just want to stay stuck because they feel comfortable in one of these 7 deadly sins. So, in kind of conclusion, it's going to be a little bit shorter show because I wanted to make sure that I just kind of tapped on these. If you have a question about any of these, or you feel that you're having an issue in some way at your home, please let me know. You can reach me at rapainley@gmail.com. My name's up here someplace. So it's rapainley@gmail.com. And just so people know, let's throw it out here today. I have had some conversations with Rosie Shapiro, and a lot of you know that I know Rosie, and we've worked on clearings and doing things. Rosie's going to be down here early next year, and I'll put out something formal eventually here. But start to throw it out at this point that we're going to be doing some house cleansings together. We'll probably do another Zoom session or maybe even a live event while she's in town. So look forward to that. I'll give more information as we have more details of that coming up here. But if you have an interest in having Rosie and I come to the house, if you need a house cleansing, you feel you have spirits in the home or something of this nature, and you're in the South Florida area, do let me know. Reach out so we can start that process because We will probably get booked up relatively quickly. So the faster you let me know, the sooner that we can go ahead and start down on the process. But I want to thank you all for being here and for watching. If you have show topics that you want me to address, please let me know. Again, you can reach me at rapainley@gmail.com. You can also reach out on my public figure page on Facebook. Like it, and you'll get notified of any events that I'm doing at that point. And you can also do the same on Rosie's page. But I want to thank you all again. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your interest. And I look forward to seeing you all again here on the Enlightened World Network. And have a great evening and a great rest of your week. Thank you.